so I'm going to go straight to Robert and the team.
Good morning, councillors and the chair. So today we're talking about the third quarter performance reporting, and this covers the period from 1 July through to 31 March 2019. On Friday you would have received a pack in your inbox which is basically covers the reporting, and we're into the third cycle now of the new format that we've delivered. So knowing that you get a lot of material, we've continued with the same format with the nice little glossy one with the tabs, so you should all have that, and that's to help make it easier sort of to navigate throughout the day. On page 9 of the pack, you'll see the agenda for today. So today we'll be starting with an overview of the group results, and that will be led by Ross, John Bishop and Francis, who will just talk to you about the combined results of the CCOs and the Auckland Council entity. It will cover off, our operating performance and a piece around the debt. From that point, we then move over to Phil Wilson, who will then talk about the group Maori outcomes, and that, just spanning across what we're doing across the group. Followed by Barry, who'll be talking on City Centre and America's Cup, and those items are within their group agenda, given that they span across their whole organisation. From that point then we'll step into the organisational agenda items, and we start with Auckland Council at 10:15 a.m. and then we move to Auckland Transport and then the rest of the CCOs throughout the day. In your pack you'll see also just points to note, we've got this little other tab. Auckland Transport did send a letter alongside their quarterly report, so they wanted to give a bit more information around their quarterly results, so we've included that letter in that pack, so they might reference to that when they come to present. And then the other, key point on item 8, we have a savings report that was referred to this committee from the APR VFM committee on the 6th of June. And that item will give a brief presentation of that item through the Auckland Council organisation item at 10:15 a.m. And with that, I'll hand over to Ross.
Thank you. This one over.
Working?
Difficulties.
We have more flex, have we? No.
So we can go to the, can we move that to the capital slide? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So I'll give an overview of the group summary for the 9 months through to the end of March. So this is the first 9 months of the 10-year budget. So as you all know, the 10-year budget included a very large, ambitious capital program, and over the first 9 months of that plan, there's been solid capital delivery. $1.3 billion has been delivered, which is a significant increase. It's up 19% on the same period last year, so the 9 months for the preceding year, or 213 million more capex delivered over the same period. So it is 85% of budget. We always have the issue, it's not quite everything we said we're going to do, but 85% still solid delivery and a significant increase. So in terms of what does that increase mean and look like on the ground, it means within that there's been significant progress on some key projects such as the Eastern Busway. So a $100 million contract has been signed, $20 million of work has been completed. Equally, there's a new footpath in Karaka that's been delivered. The multi-purpose community facility in Westgate is now operational. There's been some good progress with the Army Bay wastewater treatment plant as well over that period. So that's the capital view. So assets have been increasing rapidly as a result of the capital program. The growth in debt has been a bit less than budgeted, so that's a great place to be. Looking ahead over the next few years, debt will be ramping up as the capital program continues to develop, and we will be using up our debt headroom, but at the moment we're sitting quite comfortably below the debt to asset targets and debt to revenue targets that were set budgeted for this current financial year. John Bishop will talk a bit more in detail about the debt picture and our funding plans shortly. So moving towards the operating spend. Strong operating performance for the 9 months. On the revenue side, $24 million favourable to budget in terms of our direct revenue. So that's taking out things like rates and other things and focus on more on what are our controllable non-rates revenue lines. So within that, public transport volumes are up, regulatory volumes are up. So we're seeing higher revenue numbers because of the volumes there, and also NZTA operating subsidies have increased because of the extra services that have been running, and those NZTA operating subsidies have come through as a consequence. On the cost side, 32 million favourable against budget for the 9 months across the group. That's direct expenditure, so that takes out things like interest and depreciation to focus in on those controllable costs. So within the 32 million, there is a number of one-off OPEX items where timing has changed or they're one-off in nature, but still within it there is $16 million underspend against the employee benefits line across the group. So it is a great result in terms of just keeping a lid on cost. Just moving. Was there enough? Okay, I'll hand over to John on Treasury.
Welcome, John.
Thanks, Ross. And look, this page here really represents in graphical format what Ross has been through before. You see net debt there, so our gross debt minus cash holdings, about 8.4 billion. Our year-end long-term plan was 9 billion. We'll probably be about 200 to 250 million below that due to the slight underspend on CapEx. And that translates into a lower net debt to assets ratio and also a lower debt to revenue ratio than is in the long-term plan, and obviously well within our 265% internal limit. The right-hand side there, you'll see that Kanga News publication there, and that's one of the main bank and debt publications in Australasia. And Auckland Council was awarded the Innovative Debt Deal of the Year, and that was for our green bond issue that we did last year, and that was the first green bond issued by a New Zealand institution.
Yes, we certainly don't want people to think we're going to end up with a motorway system like that in Auckland.
Exactly. Look, I've spent a bit of time on our forecast borrowing requirements for the next financial year, so year 1920. So based on current forecasts, we think we're going to need to borrow about $1.77 billion. That's made up of about 1.12 billion of refinancing of existing debt. Now, the reason we need to refinance existing debt is that our debt levels continue to grow. So as our existing debt matures, we need to refinance that. Now, that may look like a big number, but if you think about our debt of sort of between $8 to $9 billion, and when we put in place new debt, the average sort of maturity at inception is around about sort of 8 years. So when you do the maths, we can expect going forward to need to refinance sort of around about that $1 billion a year going forward. We also have forecast requirements for about 650 million of new borrowing, and that is to fund really part of our CapEx program going forward. So again, if you look at our general CapEx over the long-term plan, averaging about 2.5 billion per year, in ballpark terms, sort of roughly 20% of that is funded through new debt. The rest is funded through contributions from central government, but mainly through our strong internal cash flows that we generate. Now, looking at funding options for next year, now I'll point out that I need to be reasonably vague about this given the securities law and NZX requirements in New Zealand, so I can't talk about definite plans, because if I do, we need to disclose that on the NZX, etc. But the things we will be looking at closely are things like another domestic green bond, so a follow-up issuance on what we did last year, and that is likely to be over assets such as electric trains, cycleways, or some water assets. And the typical size of an issuance like that would be around about anywhere between sort of 100 million to 250 million. To meet our more substantial needs, again, one option is to focus on another euro issue. Now, you might recall we did 2 of those back in calendar 2017. Now that allows us to raise more in the order of sort of 750 to 850 million New Zealand dollars in one go. If we go back to our most recent transaction in 2017, at our closing price or interest rate, we could have in fact done upwards of 3 billion New Zealand dollars at that level. So it is a far more deep and liquid market than the New Zealand market. We'll also access funds, or likely to access funds, through the local government funding agency. Now, during the calendar year to date, we've done most of our funding through the LGFA, and they typically do monthly tenders, and we can normally access between sort of $50 and $100 million in each of those tenders. We also have access to private placement opportunities. Now that's where investors come to us on a one-on-one basis seeking to lend us funds. They tend to be domestic banks or institutions, or offshore central banks, life insurance companies or other institutions, and the size of those can range from anywhere from 25 million New Zealand dollars to upwards of 300 or 400 million New Zealand dollars from bigger offshore players. So that sort of sets out our sort of main funding options over the next 12 months. I guess why are we comfortable with sort of raising upwards of sort of 1.7, 1.8 billion dollars of debt? The first thing, as you can see, we have plenty of funding options available to us. So the New Zealand market, the offshore markets, and the LGFA. The second reason we have confidence is that we have a very strong credit rating. So at a AA credit rating, we can generally access all the markets we want to on conditions which are pretty favourable to Auckland Council. And the third reason is we have backup facilities in place. So if we do see something like a global financial crisis again, we did see some of the markets around the world close for a period of time, or at least get quite expensive. We do have a range of backup facilities in place with a combination of New Zealand and offshore banks, and all those amount to about $1.3 billion. So I guess we have a fair degree of confidence going forward that we can raise this sort of debt on terms and pricing which is favourable to Council.
John, could you just remind councillors, in case they missed it, as to the success of our green bond issue last year, and what was the size and what we actually raised it against?
Yeah, through Chair, so it was a 5-year issue of 200 million New Zealand dollars and was used to refinance electric trains.
And we were the first to do?
Yeah, so we were the first green bond issued by a New Zealand institution.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Good. Okay, no questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Casey.
Just in the commentary, there was a couple of comments that I'd like more information about, and that was the underspends. There was one, the Ports of Auckland underspend in particular due to reprioritisations. What on earth does that mean? And also, I think it was due to delays in the automation project. Can you tell me what's going on there? What's been reprioritised? I've got one more question.
Sorry, so through the chair, that I guess follows on from the conversations we've been having through the annual budget process, where I think a lot of it is just more on the timing of their capital investment. So as we discussed previously, they've really looked at their whole capital program for the next couple of years, and this is basically timing changes that have related to their capital.
Appreciate timing changes, but reprioritisation, I don't understand. What's been reprioritised? What's the top of the list and what's fallen down?
I'd have to get more detail from the ports, and I can come back to you on that.
Yeah, I would like to get that today. The other one is, I also understand the RFA delays with the IT centre. We've had plenty of talk about that, but I wasn't aware that there was any delay to the zoo redevelopment. What's the reason for that? What's been going on there?
Through the chair, it might be best. RFA are here later
Nico.
today, yeah, and it would be best too.
But the Ports of Auckland aren't coming.
Yeah, I'll come back to you on that one.
Councillor Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Just could you reiterate that figure, please? Our operating surpluses get tipped into the CapEx budget to deliver the big CapEx spend that we have, so we don't have to borrow so much. What was that percentage again of the OPEX that was actually funded? The CapEx is funded by the OPEX surplus.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So if you look Ballpark terms of say our capex of on average 2.5 billion over the LTP period. Again, using percentages, roughly 20%. So 500 million we funded through new debt. Current operating cash flow surpluses are about 800 to 850 million per year. Over the long-term planning period, that will increase to about 1.6 billion by the end of the LTP period as we get to fully funding depreciation. So as we go forward, more and more of our capex will be funded through the operating cash flows.
Yep.
And that's why you'll see our both our debt to revenue peak and then decline, and also our debt to asset ratio peak at about 18% and then decline slowly to sort of 17, 16%.
And we reach 100% funding of depreciation to 2024-25 years. Is that about right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you. It's a big number.
Very important points,
Yeah.
and that's when our debt will start to taper off, although we'll probably still have the pressure on the incredible growth in Auckland. Can't see that tapering off. Ross, are you, oh, sorry, we have Councillor Walker, Wayne Walker.
So, a couple of questions. First off, around the green bonds. Very enthusiastic about that as a funding tool. What scenarios have you looked at around expanding green bonds as a proportion of our overall funding? So what's the scope there, and how can we accelerate it?
Yeah, through you, Chair. So we're going through a process now of looking very closely at what assets will qualify under the Green Bond Principles and the Climate Bonds Initiative. Now, there's certainly things like the electric trains, cycleways, which definitely qualify. We need to do some more work on water assets and what water assets qualify or not. And that needs a lot more sort of going into the detail of what they represent, how they're classified, etc. Again, I'm not probably the best person to talk to the detail, but one thing that's causing us a few problems over the water assets is they are considered a network in some regard. But we're still looking at water assets to see what can qualify and what can't. But I take your point. There is plans to expand our green bond issuance as much as possible, given the constraints of what qualifies and doesn't qualify as assets which are suitable for green bonds.
Just a supplementary question. That network approach applies across transport, so roading's a network, stormwater's a network, water's a network, wastewater's a network. So I'd suggest there's a structural problem that we need to address there in terms of the relationship between green bonds and our ability to apply them more broadly.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I think one of the issues is with some assets is how they're recorded in our fixed asset register. But again, we are doing more work to go into the detail and seeing what we can do.
Okay, and that leads me to a follow-on question, Mr. Chair, and that's around transparency and access to information. I would suggest, and I'll ask it by way of a question, is it possible for us to have financial planning tools that allow us to have information, first of all, at the group level, then to drill down into segments of that group that could be across CCOs or the like, and then to drill down into particular assets that could be around, for example, a stadium or a zoo or a particular transport component or a particular stormwater component. And this goes particularly to the discussion that I alluded to earlier around green bonds, so that we've got better analysis of our assets. We can see which assets are performing more around sustainability issues, for example, as compared to others. How are we tracking in terms of being able to provide that level of detail?
So I guess our start is to provide this kind of level of detail, what's in the quarterly reports. We have our budget book we produce twice a year, which goes into quite a bit of detail where the budgets are. So the idea is to try to be, that's our first stab at trying to be a bit more transparent and provide more information. I guess the degree of detail you're talking about goes a bit further than that, and we are kind of looking at what can we do in terms of online tools and our website to make our financial information on our website more available, more accessible, and that's something that we'll continue to look at over time.
Just a supplementary question that goes to that. Do we conduct any research, market research? Do we have any focus groups, for example, where we might ask people as to what sort of financial information they'd like? Do we do any of that? And perhaps what are the opportunities around that if we're not doing that?
So our comms team, they do a lot of customer insight work and look at what the people that we talk to, what they want, how they want to receive information, what their needs are. So they'll have some insights into that, and maybe whether that extends to specifically what kind of financial information, I don't know if they've done that yet, but we can talk to them about doing more in that space, and so we can do more work with the comms team on those things.
So just further to that, by way of a supplementary question, I'd be interested in seeing what work we are doing around that, the questions that we're asking and the responses that we're getting. That would be very constructive. Thank you.
That wasn't a question, but we'll allow it. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've just got one question around the employee benefits line, Ross. Just seeing how we're, well under there, 16 overall for the group. I was just interested if we also have FTE targets. So even though our FTEs might be up overall, our budget, we're coming under budget, are there FTE targets that we're trying to achieve across the group as well?
So through the chair, not across the group, but as you're aware, through the APR VFM committee, there are targets that are set specifically for the Auckland Council organisation under Stephen's objectives, but not at a group level, no.
If I may, Ross, just supplementary. So how we track? Do you know what that? Do you have that number and how we're tracking on that number?
I could ask Kevin. Oh, Francis, there we go.
So the CE target for 30 June is 6568, and we're at 6521 at the end of March. So at this stage, we're still tracking close. But it's obviously tight, so that's the whole purpose of having that tight target, so we're working with that. Okay. And in the commentary, you'll see where it's specifically around those new rates that we were doing. That's where the people are going.
Deputy Chair of Finance, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask a question because sometimes when people read that debt has gone up by 201 million, they think that's a terrible thing. So I just want to ask you a question. So could you confirm that that for this quarter, our debt has gone, for this reporting period, our debt has gone up 0.2%, but our asset build or our asset growth has gone up 0.7%. In other words, our debt is a lot less than what we're building. Is that correct?
Through the chair, so it's not percent, sorry. So our debt has moved since 1 July through to 30 March, end of March.
So it's
Our debt has moved up by 200 million, but our asset base has moved up by about 700 million. So our debt is obviously, our assets are growing at a lot higher rate than our debt, and that I guess reflects what John was saying earlier, where a lot of our financing is coming through other sources other than just purely debt.
And my second question is just to help, and that is, even though our debt is going up, people just think that's a really bad thing. So I'm just saying it in public so everyone understands it's actually fine.
Good. Very important to reiterate. Right. Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Look, just a note, something I'm noting from this paper on page 21 is our stake, our significant stake in Auckland International Airport is, as of that period, is 2.2 billion. At today's share price, it's actually just sitting under 2.5 billion. We often overlook some of the very solid investments that we have that underpin our business. And this is a significant strategic stake. Probably my question, Chair, is do we recognise that strategic stake and attend the annual general meetings and signal to the company that we are its largest shareholder by a country mile? Have we established now a relationship with the company, and have we moved past being the passive, silent shareholder, even noting how significant we are?
Through you, Chair, I'll have a go at answering that. Look, obviously well aware we are the most significant shareholder by a long way, and we do meet on a semi-regular basis, both with the CCO governance team and the finance team, with relevant people at Auckland Airport. Now, obviously, you know, they can't disclose things to us that they don't disclose in the public forum. But it's fair to say we have, I think, a good and robust and improving working relationship.
Just on that, there's some significant things going on at the airport, e.g. the connection with light rail. That's a big project, the Puanui project. And I understand, like, it's a company that has a roadshow through of its investors and financial institutions that have got stakes in it, and they're minor. I think the biggest stake after our 22.4% is just over 1%. So if the investor roadshows are taking place, how do we learn about that? Because I'm not aware of that information coming back to us. If you are meeting with them, how is that conveyed back to us? Because I don't have visibility of those relationships.
So in terms of the, I guess, relationships, it might be, again, something to talk with Auckland Transport around the relationships that they will be having on an operational level, but it is something that we can come back to and look at.
I guess what I've said before, I'll just leave it here, Chair, is this is a significant investment, and again, it's one that we just, I feel like it's a deposit somewhere.
Yep.
And it just sort of clicks over, rather than owning it and demonstrating to that company that we are its cornerstone shareholder, the people of Auckland.
I certainly can see no reason why they shouldn't be coming to us and making a presentation to us. And we haven't got a big enough shareholding to have a person on the board, and we're not even aiming for that. But the point is, Councillor Darby's raising a very good point.
Though there are many companies where a 22.4% shareholder would be instrumental in choosing board positions.
Yep.
Many.
Yep. But unfortunately not the Auckland Airport.
Yeah, so I'm sure they'll be happy to talk to us, and we can have a look at setting up some kind of presentation to an appropriate forum.
I think that should be followed up.
Yeah, we'll follow up.
Yeah, because as Councillor Darby's pointing out, I mean, there's so much that is happening interfacing with Auckland Transport, NZTA, Puanui, light rail, the whole thing, and needless to say, I think the Auckland Airport area is our second largest or growing economic area, effectively, with jobs, etc. So, okay, right, we'll continue on.
We'll hand over to Phil now to discuss the next bit.
Oh, the others, no one else. Yeah, it's just. Welcome, Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Morning, councillors, Mayor. So just firstly, I just want to put this session in context. So yesterday, at a separate session, we talked about Council's response to the PricewaterhouseCoopers report that the IMSB commissioned, and that went to questions of how we're managing in this space, what systems and processes have been put in place around the stewardship of the investment from the LTP of that 150 million budget. This is an update on the expenditure itself and how that's tracking and how the pipeline of work is shaping up. At the risk of complicating things further, we have a joint meeting of the governing body with the IMSB on Monday, and we will cover off in even slightly more detail aspects of this, teasing out the detail around two of the strategic priorities as we did at the last of those meetings. So I think we can move, I would hope, reasonably quickly through this to paint the picture and go to whatever questions are in your mind. I would describe this as an improving situation. It's not in the ideal space yet, but it's getting there quite fast. We have got good coordination right across the council group, i.e. including the CCOs in this space, and the pipeline of work is building quite well. You will see that to this quarter, roughly a third of the budget is expended, and we're anticipating about 3/4 of the budget to be either expended or committed. It's already allocated to particular projects, but the projects, some of them are going to flow into next year, and therefore there's a degree of carry forward in this year one scenario. There's a particular focus within the budget profile around marae development, and we have colleagues behind who can cover off any detail around that. And I will click. So here's the profile of the budget. And what it reflects actually is that we are embedding the strategic priorities that have been worked up and agreed with you, and they're now being embedded in real projects, and that gives you a sense of it. About 30% is committed to marae development, 25% involved in Māori participation. This is engagement with iwi and mātāwaka organisations and individuals around projects. I'm just focusing on the big chunky items here, and as you can see, about 24% unallocated at this stage. Now that's actually not something I'm too worried about, because I can tell you there are some quite meaty projects potentially coming through in the pipeline, some of which are from CCOs. Councillor Filipaina, big initiatives like Matatini for 2021 tied into the America's Cup and APEC effort to provide that Māori cultural element during that season. So, and I could mention a number of others. So the profile is quite good in terms of alignment with the strategic priorities.
Phil, I just wonder though there should be a bit more explanation of the unallocated, because looking at it rawly, you could also say, have we over budgeted here? Now, I'm not saying we have, but perhaps it needs a little bit more explanation about where that may go. And and as we know, there's marae development. We seem to be we're under pressure there with a lot more demand than we've got budget for. So I just think it needs maybe a little bit more explanation. Look, going forward, that's all.
So
I'm expecting we will not be in this situation next year. If anything, the budget will be oversubscribed and we'll have to prioritise things back a bit more rigorously. We are applying quite a lot of business case discipline to the initiatives that are being funded out of this, and that's taking time to work through. Personally, I don't think you should be worried about the unallocated budget. It simply reflects the fact that there was a sizable new budget came into being with the approval of the LTP. We're 9 months into that process, and the pipeline of work is still building to consume the available resources.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not worried. It's just that some people can be mischievous about such things.
Right.
If I could just add to that through you, Mr. Chair, there is 24 projects seeking a total of $32 million at the moment that are being assessed. And as Phil has said, the important aspect is not just that we're allocating projects, but that there's really good rigour in terms of that assessment, so that we're actually funding the things that make the real difference out there in Māori communities and with mana whenua. And some of the types of projects that are in the pipeline are things like ngā mara hupara, which are the playgrounds inspired by traditional Māori practices. There's kaimoana shellfish reseeding projects in the pipeline. There's digital wayfinding stories in the pipeline about maunga, awa and tangata. There's Hikoia Te Kōrero, which is Māori Language Parade for Māori Language Week, and economic development master planning for marae, so that they're actually economically sustainable and prosperous, along with things like disaster readiness for marae as well. So there's a number of things in the pipeline that are being assessed at the moment.
All good. Thank you.
This slide is simply a graphical representation of this building pipeline. So you can see where we started at the beginning of this financial year. It reflects the increasing number of projects, and Carol's just talked to a number of others that actually flow through into the next financial year. That's right, it's all right, slight delay. So, just go back one second. So this is this is simply providing a detail. This is in your packs in the commentary. I think that the key thing that you will note, as you've referenced, Mr. Chair, is the marae expenditure. And I might just, if I can, Rod or Luanne, do you want to comment on the marae program?
Can you put the slides 2 forward, Sandra, please? One more. One more.
So kia ora koutou. In terms of the expenditure for the Marae Development Program, the 2.5 was allocated for the this current financial year. Of that, 300k will be spent. The 2.2 will be carried over, but will be allocated towards the Marae program, which is running as a pilot at the moment.
And Rod, I might just get you to comment on community facilities, kind of stewardship of the...
Yeah, look, through the chair, kia ora koutou. As Phil said, this was a new initiative. The money came in. There was a lot of delays in actually making sure we got the scoping of work right. And as the team have said here, there's been a lot of communication with Marae's. There's also been a lot of communication on who is the principal, making sure that council is We work in partnership with the Marais and don't end up wearing all the risk. So there's been a whole lot of legal advice, and it's taken some time to get a position to where we are all comfortable with that. We now believe we're comfortable. The team are working with the Marais on their port, what we need the Marais to get up to speed on. So we can all work forward and go forward on this in a collaborative way where it is a partnership, where we are all sharing a little bit of the risk and we can work through this. We believe we've got there, and as the team said, we've got a huge backload of work there, and as Phil made comment, I think next year we'll be coming to you saying we've got to slow some things down as we move forward. But be assured that risk has been mitigated and the scope and diligence for each project is being done thoroughly through the process.
I think it's worth just acknowledging the good collaboration in this space. So principally Watercare and Auckland Transport are participating with us on the wider program around Marae. So we've got good alignment around approach roads to Marae, dealing with some of the health issues around water supply and treatment, particularly in the rural Marae. There's an emphasis on some of the compliance issues in terms of fire and so on. This is bedrock stuff in terms of working equitably to bring Marae up to a standard of amenity and public health wise. There's been very good work done to assess where each of the Marae are at, and that's informing the prioritisation of the expenditure. So, you know, I would compliment my colleagues in terms of coming on and managing this in quite a rigorous manner.
Do we, is there much disagreement about the contestability of the priorities, or about which projects we should move on? I mean, we do get that with surf clubs, we do get that around this table with the Panuku work program. So is that working harmoniously?
Through the chair, the prioritisation is still being developed, but it is based on what we have available in terms of the condition of the building assessment. So we're feeling comfortable that that's a robust approach to it.
Okay, all good. Councillor Casey.
Yep, just to invite members who are not, councillors who are not members of my committee along tomorrow, where we'll be giving out 1.2 million of said cultural initiatives grant to 9 worthy Marae, and also invite you along to the tour. We usually go once or twice a year to the Marae to see the work that's been done, and we went down south to see 3 Marae a few months ago. Fantastic reception. We are doing good work and we don't often get recognised for it. So I'm really pleased that this is finally rising up to the top. Thank you.
You need to let us know when you do the visits. Mayor Goff.
Thank you. Just to, Carol, just to clarify the comments you made before, I'm not sure I got them down accurate. There were 32 Marae projects seeking funding, is that correct? Or is it?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I was talking about the range of proposals across all the strategic priority areas.
Oh, not just Marae development.
No, it's not just Marae, Mr. Mayor.
So can you give us those figures again?
So there's approximately in the pipeline that we're assessing at the moment, there's 24 different projects, and the total funding being requested is $32 million.
And what's the total sum of money available to meet those projects?
So over the 10-year budget, there's 150 million.
Yeah, but these different projects are over what time frame?
Most of them are over the next 3 years.
Okay. So you're imagining that you will, that provided they meet the standards, you will be able to assist with most of those projects?
Indeed, it seems that we would be able to. It may be a little oversubscribed, but that is where the work around the rigour and the assessment comes in. Okay.
Now, with the Marae program, you've got 2.5 million allocated for the coming financial year, but 2.2 million carried forward. Does that mean that you've got 4.7 million to expend? And are you anticipating you're going to expend that in the coming year? Or will you continue to carry over?
No, through the chair, we believe that we will spend that next year. We've got a pipeline of work, and we've worked with the board, the Marae, to get our agreements in place, and we believe that we will be able to spend that next year.
How many marae have we got across Auckland that you're covering?
So under this program, we have 32 eligible marae.
Okay. And do we have a list of, would we be able to get a list of likely projects on a marae by marae basis, so we kind of have a better idea of what's happening?
Yeah, through the chair, most definitely. As we formulate the list and prioritise, we can send the list out.
Okay.
Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the slide with the strategic priority financial year 19 allocations. I'm interested in you talked a little bit about the bigger chunks. I'm interested in the smaller chunks and those percentages. 0.8% Māori housing, papakainga, 0.5% te reo Māori, 1.3% realising rangatahi potential. Thinking of my youth panel here. I'm just wondering at what stage you will look to grow those. I know that there's probably overlap in a number of those projects, and these are probably specific funding allocations to those areas, but I'm interested to see how we're going to attend to some of these allocations, because these, in my view, these are really important areas.
The first thing I would say is that there is a specific presentation on that dimension, Māori housing, papakainga, on Monday at the joint meeting. So that's an opportunity to dig into that a little bit deeper. But Carol?
So through you, Mr. Chair, great question, Councillor. One of the things that's happening in terms of the Te Tō Takatini Māori Outcomes Program is the development of performance measures. So not only, do we have a good strategic framework now and some interventions in terms of the council group approach to that, but now we're developing performance measures that will tell us how we're going, and it may, that will influence the investment and help guide future investment. Because you are right that there are some bigger chunks there and some smaller, but over time with the performance measures we'll be able to have a better idea of where we should be investing based on evidence.
Supplementary, Mr. Chair. So you will gather the evidence, I take it, Phil and Karen, that's really useful. And it will be over that you've just said to the Mayor that you'll, in the next 3 years, you'll be looking at a number of these projects that'll get funding, all that kind of thing. How soon will that evidence start to flow through some of the prioritising of budget allocation?
Yeah, it depends what the measures are. So the measures are going to be formulated for the top 4 priorities by the end of June. So the top 4 priorities have already been established as marae development, as Māori business and economic development, as te reo Māori, and there is one other one that we've kaitiakitanga water. And actually you'll see from this chart here that kaitiakitanga water and other outcomes isn't highly expended from this 150 million that's been allocated in the LTP. And one of the reasons for that is that other resources around the council group, from water care, from healthy waters, are investing heavily in that particular area. So the lineup of spend isn't necessarily where the priorities are because of the resources brought to bear by other parts of the council group.
Councillor Yeah. Councillor Darby.
Thank you for this report. You mentioned 32 marae in total in reply to the Mayor's question. How many of those are mana whenua, iwi related, and how many are matawaka related?
Through the Chair, I don't know the exact figures, but it will be approximately 50-50.
About 50-50?
Yeah, approximately.
That's good to hear. So there's significant spend in the Māori development area. It's good to hear that 50-50 split. 85% of the Māori population of Auckland is not linked to an iwi group. Well, maybe not one here anyway. No. It could be from elsewhere. And under Māori identity and culture, there's another significant spend there. So how are we, just maybe you could just briefly explain how we're making sure the stories that affect 85% of Māori, those that are of Mata Waka, are contributed to, and also effective Māori participation. There's a focus there. It's another big spend budget, 2.2, and the focus of the discussion in that very short narrative there is about the iwi as opposed to Mata Waka as well. I'm just trying to get a sense. We're being reminded of this quite regularly now. That we have got really good, strong mana whenua relationships, and we're building on those and building projects out of it, but the 85% don't necessarily relate. So just getting a sense of how we're responding to that 85%.
Just coincidentally, the Māori participation dimensions, the other major group of initiatives that's being profiled on Monday at the joint meeting, so more detail to follow there. Look, what I can't off the top of my head tell you what the division is between sort of Mata Waka focused investment there and mana whenua. Suffice to say that a lot of what we're doing in the improving and changing our engagement approaches with Māori into Māori communities is focused in the Mata Waka space. It's showing some really good returns, I believe, in terms of the profile of submissions and the nature of input that we're getting out of Kenneth's team. But look, beyond that, I would prefer, if we can, to leave it till Monday and supply you with quite a detailed picture of that.
All right, there's no further questions, so that's it? I know we went back to that, but there's no more, I don't know. All right, good. All right, thank you, Carol. Thank you, Phil. Barry, City Centre Program.
Good morning. What I'll use the opportunity here, if I may, this is a real-time project, and so I'll give a real-time update on what's reported in the papers, because it's under construction, lots of things are happening, and so what's in the papers actually gets a little dated. I thought that might be helpful if I take the opportunity to do that. I'll also move through some of this quite quickly. I might need a hand with this next. I'll move through this quite quickly, because I think my understanding is councillors have probably seen this update on what's actually happening around. I've seen it at least once or twice. So, I can spend more time if you would like. But if we look just what's happening in the next 5 years, considerable public works construction there, including the ports, ranging from America's Cup through CRL and all the way up to Karangahape Road. So a lot is going on in the next 5 years. And next slide, if we look out to 10 years, then we start seeing what's going on with Wellesley Street and Federal Street and Upper Albert and around the Aotea station. It sort of rolls out into the first 5 years of the next 10 years. A lot happening. In fact, if we look at putting aside CRL, there's about $1 billion worth of works going in the next 10 years in the city centre, so major investment that's happening. And if we look at what's underway right now, next slide please. So live right now, you can see America's Cup, the dark black or dark blue is public works, and the lighter colours private sector work. So you can see construction around America's Cup underway, Key Street, which is about to start. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. And Karangahape Road, which is about to start. Rolling out new year, Aotea Station, more work on Albert Street, car park down the ports area. Lots happening. Next slide, if we look at second half next year, then we're really finishing off. The focus here is to finish off what's going on in the downtown part to free up that space and make it a real prime space for America's Cup. And if we then look at first half of 2021, when America's Cup is on, essentially all the downtown area is pretty much completed. Some of it we'll have to come back and do after America's Cup, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So you see the scale of the works that are underway. It is all happening. And of course, this brings a number of things with it. So next slide, if we look at the highlights, things that are underway right now, we've got the downtown resource consents for the downtown ferry basin. We've received that in the last little while, the last couple of weeks. We've got Lower Albert Street. We've got the seawall consents for sections 3 and 4 down near Prince's Wharf. And we've just received the Quay Street enhancements consent. Construction can now start on all these. That's fantastic. We have the resource consent has been lodged for the downtown public space. We expect to get that later in the year. The seawall, which is the seawall around the ferry building, we have that consent, and we expect to get that later on in the year as well. The Dolphin, 2 appeals to the Dolphin, and that process will run over the next few months. There's mediation on at the moment, and the hearing is likely to be in December, and any decision on that will be in the new year, probably February. So Karangahape Road works have been awarded to JFC, John Fillmore Construction, and that is happening starting next week. We'll see things happening in Karangahape Road. Victoria Lindo Park, the work on preparing the business case and concept design for that has been awarded in the last month to Jacobs. So that's up and running, and we'll start getting plans in on that. It'll take a few months to get that work done. We're also looking at reviewing the allocation of costings in the city centre targeted rates. A number of the costs are well dated, and so we're looking at how we accommodate that and change priorities in that area. So that's work's being done right now with the City Centre Advisory Board working through that process. So if we go on the next slide and look at some of the issues here, look, stakeholder engagement, development response, I think we're all well aware of the challenges that development brings onto the businesses in the area who are affected by that. We are working hard to try and resolve that. It is challenging work to do major development without disruption or minimise disruption. So that's something that the teams are very focused on. The Wynyard Bridge, I'll just mention that because consent is being lodged, and we'll need to make a decision on the Wynyard Bridge. That's the Tawero Bridge. We'll need to make a decision on that in August, because it is likely at this stage that work couldn't be completed by America's Cup. So we may end up having to have the current bridge there. We might spend a little bit of money on that to tidy it up, but I think we're going to run out of time. There's a general feeling we just can't deliver that in time. So that's an issue. We also have, we can deliver Quay Street, but we won't be able to deliver all of the downtown public space by America's Cup. So we're working through that. So we don't end up with a big construction site down the bottom of town. That's a detail we're working through there. The program is tight, and we're all aware of that. We want to make sure that we leave that downtown area in the best state we can for America's Cup. With costs, again, cost pressures, costs are tight. We as you're aware, report on P50 as our price, so it means half coming under and half coming over. We're balancing those out, and that's allowing us to do work in the downtown area. Some projects might be over budget, but for example, the seawall is coming under budget, so we're looking at how we're looking at it on a program basis, because if we just focus on a project basis, we'll get ourselves quite tied up. So we're managing that process there. There are some challenges with the downtown public space around cost. We're also doing a value engineering exercise on that at the moment. Okay, so it's probably easier just to look at some photos and just what's happening, and I can talk a little bit more about the detail there. Top left there is lower Queen Street. That's being delivered by City Rail Link Limited. Now, the right-hand side of that area, that's the final completed scope for Lower Queen. The right-hand side of it, in the last couple of weeks, we've decided we won't be able to complete that. There's a challenge there because Precinct are doing their redevelopment of the HSBC building, and they need access, and to do that, if we didn't give them that, the implications are quite significant. We've been working with Precinct to resolve that, so most of Lower Queen will be available, but we're looking at very high quality hoardings, maybe green walls, and Precinct will cover the costs of that so they can get access into their site, otherwise we have an issue. We have the right-hand photo there, which is Key Street enhancement. We're on track for that. The trees are coming out at the moment. The trees are being put into storage. If you hear people getting upset the trees are being removed, please assure them that we're actually taking them out, putting them into storage to reinstall them later. But there has been a bit of feedback that people are upset because they see trees going. Well, we're saving as many as we can. Lower left-hand is the downtown public space, and as I mentioned, we are unlikely to be able to deliver all of that by America's Cup, and we're going through an exercise at the moment about what we can have done by then and what we'll hold back until after America's Cup so we don't end up with a construction site down there. And then we've got the Wynyard Bridge, which is the Bascule Bridge, the swing bridge on the bottom right there. I've mentioned that. I think at this stage, my feeling is unlikely that will be delivered by America's Cup. We then look at Albert Street. So that's all under construction now. We've landed on agreed options on the design and layout of Albert Street. That's next year, which is fantastic. We'll see work there. We can see work underway on that. Top right is Federal Street. That's from Wallasey Street through to Merrill Drive. Now, the design for that's all complete. And we're looking at how we can construct that, given that we've got the City Mission House building on the right-hand side there between Federal Street and Hobson Street. They need access along here for their construction works. So we're working with them to figure out how that's best delivered. Maybe a delay on that. We may deliver half the road and then the second half later do it kind of east and west in two halves. Bottom left-hand, Karangapi Road, construction starts next week on that. And Victoria Linear Park, as I mentioned, that's the bottom right-hand one. The concept work and business case on that is underway at present. So that's an update on the City Centre program. Any questions on that?
I'm not going to take questions, Barry. You're going to move straight on to America's Cup.
Excellent. Thank you.
We're running behind time.
Wonderful. Okay, America's Cup.
At the end of America's Cup we will, but we're actually half an hour behind time already. So.
All right, I'll do my best to catch up half an hour. So America's Cup, if we go to the next slide. I've just got a couple of slides here. So we're at host venue agreement that was signed in April, which is great. Detailed planning for the event is up and running and underway. There are steering groups for on-water and off-water activities, so that's all being run. Police are working on the national response or the security area, elements of that. There's been some changes to the number of challenges that people will be aware. I think we've currently got 5 challenges, with a couple of those to be confirmed by 1 July. So we're pretty close to having that confirmed. So we're looking at that. We've had one drop out, so we've got a spare base, and we're looking at what we're doing with that at the moment. It's the southernmost base on Wynyard Point. Probably we'll give that to the police. They need, and we've got needs for other support services around there, so we're working through that at the moment. We're also looking at opportunities to take some cost out by, you might recall that there are infill bridges that we, if you know Wynyard Wharf, we'll look at the next slide. There's some infill bridges we have to put in. We may not need all those infill bridges.
Okay, all good.
Okay, so what's underway right now? I mentioned the bridges there. The blue ones, this is on Wynyard Point. We're just having a think about the need for those at the moment. 2 of the bases, one of the report's not correct and that things have changed since it was prepared. We've got 2 of the bases on Wynyard Point are under construction, but there's no need, and we're going to deliver those by August, except the southern, the bottom red base there. There's no need for that until later next year, and that provides a great laydown space for the construction of Daldy Drain. So we're taking the opportunity, not delivering that on the original program, holding it back, and then it helps us do the Daldy Drain. So that's all happening, and if you wander down that area, you'll see barges and cranes and workers. We had celebrations. Team New Zealand hosted the Wynyard Edge Alliance a couple of weeks ago at their base for handing over their base on the due date. It was a wonderful event with Blair Duke and Peter Burling serving the drinks, and they covered it. It was good, so it's a good story.
Right, questions, Councillor Simpson.
Thank you. Look, one of the things that concerns me about this marrying into the planning committee is, what do the public know? The fact that you have people asking what is happening to trees means that there is potentially a real lack of awareness to the people on the street, what's happening, why, when, and how it'll impact their entering, exiting, moving around the city in whatever form that takes. So can you give me confidence that you are actually talking to not just the business stakeholders of the people who are within the city centre, but actually those who are entering it from all sorts of places in all sorts of ways? Because I think that's the missing link. We made a terrible mistake on Quay Street. We know that. People didn't know it was coming. They didn't know the timing. And therefore they got incredibly angry because they didn't understand, right? I cannot tell you more strongly how important it is to make sure that never happens again. So what are you doing about telling?
So there's a number of things happening there, and the downtown program is being delivered by Auckland Transport. They are, you talked about the businesses, really good interaction with the businesses. The website on this is up and running at the moment. There's more to be added into that, so we're directing people to the website around the city centre. We can send the link to that to councillors if you don't have it. We're also doing our stories in our Auckland, so we're trying to get stories out in the media about what's going on around downtown, because it is in the city centre, because they are. It's never happened in my lifetime before, the amount of work that's going on. So we're trying multiple ways of getting the story out there.
The key to this is local boards. They know their communities and they have those networks. We must talk to them. Tell them, show them all the links, and make sure that they get it out to their communities, because you know, there's a hang of a lot of work happening, and people have to have enough notice to know what that disruption is going to look like and how they work with it and around it. And that is absolutely key to so much of this. So please, can you give that urgent thought? I mentioned it at the workshop, Chris, and it's, you just got to get on with it soon. Don't rely on the media. You never know what they're going to say. We have to do it ourselves. Thank you.
Thanks for that feedback, because through the chair, because we have focused probably overly on the Waitemata local board, and we might need to expand that more broadly.
There are people that come, there are people that come into the city that don't live in the Waitemata local board area, okay?
Noted.
Right, councillors, just remind everyone we're 35 minutes behind. I have Councillor Casey, Darby, Hills and Wayne Walker.
Mine is about the knowledge councillors have keeping up to date with the America's Cup work. And apologies if I missed this, but when we signed off the plans, I was aware that the super yachts were going to contribute to an anchor tax, and that's suddenly gone. But
Sorry,
there's still...
I missed the question. What was that? Sorry.
The question relates to the super yacht
Yeah.
anchor tax that we plan to get some revenue from.
Right.
So am I right in thinking that we're still building, or the perks for the super yachts are still going to be made, but we're no longer getting the revenue we thought we were going to get at the time that we made that decision? Whatever you call it, I'm just... how do I not know that that happened?
That the super yacht bases, that area is managed by Team New Zealand. We have revenue coming through that.
I'm talking specifically about the berth tax on the super yachts.
I don't believe we have a berth tax.
Annual plan.
I think you need to explain the difference between mooring and berthing and what's happening in each respect, because my understanding is the super yachts will still be meeting the cost of the berthing.
That's correct.
But we've scaled back the mooring, which is just simply anchoring out into the harbour.
Which shows you that I'm not up to date with what's
Right.
happening, which is the point I made at the beginning.
All right.
I don't want to read in the Herald what's happening in America's Cup land. I want to hear it directly from you.
Okay. All right. Noted. And
So we will
I
have
can
an
get a note to
offline
you on that.
discussion
Yes,
about
yeah,
this.
we can do that.
Thank you.
Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you for the increased comms. I've actually been reading your comms because the emails come on a pretty regular basis. And thanks for responding to something that was raised at the Planning Committee, and you did a timeline and which I've shared on social media, and we all can use that to share the information. So there has been a big beefing up in the communications from Barry's office, Simon Oddie's office, to all of us. Maybe it's a matter of opening some emails and reading them and then sharing. And just a correction on the nobody knew about Quay Street. Remember the follow-up story that the Herald also did when they revealed that a major company that we own 100%, don't have to say the name, but you'll work that one out, I'm being polite, did know about everything that was going on, even though it said it didn't know what was going on. So let's read our emails maybe and share the information.
Mr. Chairman, I really resent that. I've had a week off for personal reasons, so I might be a bit behind.
We're reading the Herald follow-up
Just-
reports. That's the main thing.
And thank you, Barry. Just noting that we just got a consent for the ferry terminal, the new ferry terminal, and the appeals expired. The appeal period expired 2 weeks ago. Hebs were on the job 1 week after that, which was quite remarkable, with the yellow buoys out as of Monday, I think, and I saw them this morning. Hey, just in terms of the value engineering, I always get a little bit scared when I hear that term. Can you confirm that does not suggest a reduction in the qualities of a design that has gone through a consenting process and have been agreed? It is how it is built. Can you just qualify the value engineering? I think you know where I'm coming from.
Through the chair, yes, that's essentially correct. The structure that was original concept for the downtown structure, they had beams and flats. It was quite a complex structure. Visually, you get what was planned originally with a better structure. Quite some costs come out of that. One of the considerations at the moment is in the original concept, the trees were set down below the slab essentially, so at ground level. That's a really expensive way of doing it, considering whether you actually have the trees planted partly above ground, and you can reduce cost around things like that. So those are things that are being looked at the moment, just around those which hopefully don't significantly change the concept, but certainly reduce cost. It's that kind of thing that's being considered.
And look, thank you for working out the Albert Street bus bays, and that was good collaboration. City Centre Advisory Board, Patrick Reynolds and your people resolved that with AT, and it was just terrific. And we landed a solution we're all signed up to. Just some of those public spaces I'm a little bit concerned about. So Lower Queen Street, as we might call it, which is the section between Customs and Quay, is that going to be ready for AC36?
Through the chair, yes, that will be ready for AC36, except the western part of that. And the issue is that Precinct are doing their refurbishment of the HSBC building. They need truck access into that. So we have worked with them. It was either sacrificing part of Quay Street or part of Lower Queen, and so that's been a collaborative process between Precinct, Auckland Transport, CRLL, and the thinking at the moment is that the western part of Lower Queen for the America's Cup event, we will have to sacrifice on the proviso that the treatment of that space, the hoarding around it, is very, very high quality hoarding, probably green walls, and that's because Precinct want that same environment for Commercial Bay.
Okay, and lastly, very quick, Chair, you referred to the Dolphin, you referred to the appeal period, and at best we'd be getting a decision first quarter of 2020. But my understanding is that there still needs to be a financial decision on the Dolphin, which I think is a bit of a dead duck dolphin now. And that is at 10 million in LTP, and we know that the estimates are now north of 20, 21, 23. So that still requires a financial decision of this council. I think you know.
Correct.
That's the case.
I don't know about a dead duck dolphin, it might be
Jim,
just a dead
is
dolphin.
that dolphin still under judicial process? Well, it's an appeal. That is an appeal. It's under appeal. I just wondered, will we get caution not to speak about things that are under appeal? We shouldn't really.
You've brought up a good point there, Councillor. Councillor Hills, and we've got Councillor Hills and Councillor Walker, and please, we are 3/4 of an hour behind.
Thank you, Chair. We have got the updates, but first of all, congratulations on the work that is happening in Albert Street. Great to have trees, no bus bays, and a much better public space there. I can't believe how fast Hobson Extension has been built. But the updates are wrong of what you're saying on some of the downtown work and the Wynyard Bridge. Is this the first we're hearing that those won't be ready for downtown, for the America's Cup? Because what are we going to do to mitigate the masses of people there when we already have issues with that bridge? We cleared that space of cars 2 years ago pretty excitingly, and now we're not going to have we're going to have potential issues with that bridge. And the downtown works, how much are we going to be able to complete? Like, I don't think visitors care about some construction, but there should be at least some spaces which are finished. So half the Quay Street downtown public space, that's really concerning to me. Like, what is finished and what is not?
So, through the chair, at this stage, the program and delivery for the works down there is Quay Street from the western end through down towards well past Queen Street, Lower Queen. Part of the downtown public space. Some of the works out over the water, but they may not have public access those over the water. We just can't physically build it in time. So that's the constraint. And in terms of updating, you're getting lifetime real updating here, which is different to what the story was a couple of weeks ago. We didn't have consents 2 weeks ago for Quay Street, for example. So I'm giving you, this is happening and moving quickly, and the comms will come along and update on that. So
I guess just in the agenda, it's still saying end of 2020, and what we received in the workshop only a couple of weeks ago was end of 2020, and what Chris is talking about that he put on Facebook a couple of days ago is wrong too. So I'm just concerned if we're undercooking everything, or what. I just want to know in the next week or so what is actually going to be finished and what we're going to do to mitigate, to make sure some things are looking fantastic and shiny, and how much of the western side of the Lower Queen Street will not. Are we talking half of Lower Queen Street, or we're talking a little driveway access? Because
Barry, you'll come back with,
Yes,
with
some
something
of
by
that,
next
I
week.
can, yes, I think so.
Okay.
Some of that, I think it's about 10 metres or something, 10 or 15 metres of that side of Lower Queen.
Okay. Right, we're down to Councillor Walker, and Councillor Walker, if you can just stick to one question, it would be appreciated.
I'll be really quick, and essentially it's following on from my colleague Desley Simpson about communication. I'm mindful that we've got significant business activity in all of this area, especially retail, and a huge number of people working there. And we're talking about immense disruption and businesses that some of them are going out of business because they just can't sustain the losses that they're incurring. So have we got a comprehensive plan for communicating with businesses so they know what's going on, because they've got to budget cash flows and a whole raft of things, and so that businesses can advise their employees and the like and make the appropriate decisions so they know what's going on? And associated with that, does that plan include as much activation and assistance as we can, because we know that there is no provision for any assistance from CRLL?
Barry?
Through the chair, yes.
Yes, good. Okay. The rest. Right, thank you, Barry. And I know you're only down for two subjects here, but there is a third one which is not insignificant, and it's not actually poultry. But do you want to update what you said to NBC and CNN about poultry and rats in Titirangi? In 30
Through the
seconds.
chair, as a resident of the area, I'm not too sure I should say too much.
Anyway, thank you, Barry.